Welcome to the Dr. Pete Goldman Show. I'm super honored and psyched to have Nicholas Pettas with us, straight out of Japan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's going to be fun. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. Okay, so I just want to say that, just to the audience, when I interview people from various walks of life. Sometimes I have a little bit in common with them. Sometimes I don't. But we have a little bit in common. I wasn't quite an Uchideshi, but I was pretty close to it, of Soshu Suguro Oyama, who obviously was a, Kyokushin legend. And I was training with him, at one point, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, and fighting all over in Europe and the US for him back in the early 90s. So when I read your autobiography, not only was it a great book, and I couldn't put it down. It was a thick freaking book, and I couldn't put it down. I mean, I just could not put the book down. One, because you have a great story, really a great story, sincerely. Two, because it's a great book. And three, because I could kind of relate to it. I feel, I know what it's like.
Yeah.
So, anyway, just wanted
thank you. That's a really nice intro. It took me 10 years to complete the book, so to finally have it out there, and now I've done the director's cut on YouTube, so it's also kind of cool.
Cool. Let me just, and I obviously I've read your book, and I obviously was a fan of yours in Kyokushin and K1, years ago. So I'm familiar with a lot of stuff. Just before we get into, some of your Uchideshi days, if you wouldn't mind just telling the audience just a little bit about your childhood in Denmark and how that kind of led you into that experience you had on the street where you wanted to learn how to defend yourself and then finding your way into a Kyokushin dojo in Denmark. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was born in Greece, but raised in Denmark. And so we moved to Denmark when I was like two years old, something like this. I was always kind of a little bit of a chubby kid. So I used to be, or try to hide my insecurities with a smart mouth. And so in my early teens, we were at a party when I was 14 years old. And there was a guy at the party that wanted me to play a song while I was DJing. And I didn't really like the way he spoke to me. So I kind of pretty much told him to piss off. And then I didn't know he was a street fighter because I'd never met him before. And so I tried to go home and unlock my bicycle when the next thing I saw was a soccer ball kick that is coming straight toward my face. And then he grabbed me and punched me and basically pounded me. And I was just like, I didn't know what to do. So the flights or fight mode kind of kicked in, and I just bolted across this big street in Denmark without looking left or right. And I just jumped over a fence and hid in someone's garden. Thank God he didn't come look for me, because I would have not known what to do. I'd never ever fought anyone up until then, except for my brother maybe. But that's not really fighting. It's just me getting my ass kicked by a brother. And so I was lying there, and it was cold. There was a bit of snow, I remember. And I was scared shitless. Like I had been really, really shooken to my core with fear. And I didn't like that feeling. And I remember lying there thinking, what can I do to get better or not ever have to experience that again? And so it came to me slowly, the word karate is what if I do karate? If I do karate, I could probably become good and strong, and I can protect myself. So I chose karate that day. Little did I know that many years later, it was under the influence of the Karate Kid, the movie that I'd seen, that kind of personalized myself into that character and thought, if Ralph Macchio could do it, then I could do it too. So that was when I was 14. And then it was a couple of weeks before my birthday's in January on 23rd. And on the 11th of January that year, 1988, a friend of my big brother took me to a dojo and gave me his old dogi, and I just signed up for it straight away.
I have a question. When you were laying there with that kind of negative experience, and then the karate came in your head, were you feeling kind of angry and vengeful, or just kind of peaceful, I'm not gonna have this happen again?
Well, that's a good one. I wasn't feeling vengeful or anything. I never suck out revenge or try to get back at him or anything. I kind of feel like he gave me the turning point of my life where I was like, okay, I'm never going back to that kid. Regardless of what the journey is going to take me, I'm never going back to being that same kid again. So in some way I can thank him for where I am today.
You you obviously, and we'll of course go through this as we talk. Of course, I know it already. You obviously not only were at your dojo, you went to Japan, you became an Uchideshi, you became one of the best Kyokushin fighters on the planet at some point, became a K1 fighter, etc. When you first just kind of decided I'm going to learn karate to defend myself, did you even have an inkling? I mean, even 1% inkling of any of that, or was it just strictly I'm going to learn to defend myself, or was there some other, maybe as you look back, some intuitive feeling this could be a life-changing experience?
Well, the first time I put on the gi, I felt so super comfortable in it. I remember the first class I ever did with an instructor at the dojo. I was doing a louder ki than everybody. I was saying os with pleasure from my heart, although I'd never done this before. I remember the sensei going, "Where have you done karate before?" Because for some reason, I must have been good at it, because the movements came very natural to me. I picked up everything very easy. The skills on karate for me, they came very fast. And he was convinced that I trained somewhere else. And I was like, no, I haven't. But see, being a chubby kid at 14 now, at that point I was 15, I lost a lot of weight because I started training every day and working out. And it just boosted my confidence. And so even getting recognized by, people around you and people that you trained within the dojo and things like that, it was very motivating. But I was never in it for the fighting. That was never really my goal. I got kind of sucked into that when I came to Japan. And also I was talking about was, the All Japan champions, the world champions, and seeing them firsthand and training with them on camps and actually watching Francisco Filho knock out Andy Hu at the world tournament was mind-blowing for me. 4 years later, I'm fighting Francisco Filho in the same tournament. So no, I had no idea, actually.
Did you, when you were, and I guess we're fast forwarding a little again, but when you were at that first dojo in Denmark, in addition to the things you said, you were like kind of a natural, et cetera, you talked a little bit about what you were thinking. Was it also kind of like, not so much a father figure, but were you kind of finding like a family there amongst the dojo, or that wasn't even on your mind? You just were loving the training?
Well, I was loving the training for one thing, but I was very fortunate because I had a bunch of kids that had been going there around my age, where we were all 14, 15, or 16, and we had this juniors team, training team, and I jumped right in on that, and really made friends with a bunch of those kids, and we all loved the training. They were a bit better than me because they'd been going; they were like green belts and stuff like that, and I was just like, oh, okay, I got to catch up to these guys, and so I progressed very fast with the belts. I also skipped the grade. At one point, I jumped from third Q to first Q. On my last grading in Denmark, and I think it wasn't so much finding a family or anything. It was just really a bunch of kids that just loved training together, and it was very different from the kind of kids I had hung out with up until then. And then
you, at some point, did you go to Japan first just to go there, or your first travel to Japan was you already were signed up to be an Uchideshi?
So. Fun fact here. The first trip to Japan was when I was a baby.
Greece.
We were in Greece. I was like 2-3 weeks old, and my dad decided that he needed to go to Japan and study Zazen in Kyoto. So he'd found a temple that had accepted him to come and do some training there. So he moved the whole family to Kyoto right after I was born.
It's interesting because, not that I'm an expert in the subject, but there are those, anthropologists and philosophers who will talk about like nature and nurture. Your nature is your genes and your nurture is kind of your environment. So if there's something to the genetic thing, your dad obviously had a pull to Japan. Maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Well, we lived there for 6 months. I think, though, to be honest, we were living in a Japanese old style house, so I'm crawling around on the tatami mats and probably being fed, Japanese not mother's milk, but Japanese bottled milk, because I was never breastfed. Apparently, that's I found out many years later. So it's kind of like I got it in with the mother's milk side of kind of effect of it. But when one of my senpais, he said to me, you're training like those Uchideshis. I was like 16 years old, and I was like, I'd never heard of what an Uchideshi was, and so I asked him what it was, and he goes, "That's these young kids that go over and train for 1,000 days with Sosai." And his from what he had heard, he said that there was no foreigner to have ever have graduated from it, and I was just like, wait, Sosai is alive. It was completely mind blowing to me. I was like, no way. I mean, I'd only seen photos like the one behind me, or the ones that are black and white of him hitting a sandbag, and I was just like, I thought they were hundreds of years old. I mean, this is all before the internet. It's not like you go to the dojo and you do the training and then they tell you about what's going on in Japan or what's going on in the world. It was very different times, and I think the not knowing anything was a blessing. So I went to my mom and said, look, I want to go to Japan and train for 3 years. And she's like, ooh, okay, can't you finish high school first? And I was like, no, it's got to be now. And then she agreed to that, and we spoke about it a couple more times, of course. And then I got a recommendation letter from my branch chief in Denmark, and sent it off. And then the moment and the day that I got the answer, we were going on a summer camp with Michael Thompson. And I was super excited. I opened up that letter, and my heart was pounding like nothing else. And I was just like, oh, yeah, it's really happening. So as I said, you need to be in Japan by March, the end of March, the following year, which was 1991. And I quit school there and just started saving up money.
Are you in touch? Did you kind of stay in touch with Michael Thompson over the years, or you just kind of met him and that was it?
Well, we trained on the camp, and then he came and fought in the world tournament, and then I think that's about it. And then I met him with Andy Hoog during the K1 years a couple of times, where we always sat down and spoke. So it was kind of nice to keep that connection. Then I remember he opened a gym with Andy Hoog in Switzerland at one time when he was training and being the head coach over there. But I think he's back in England or Sweden.
I think so. One thing listen, we all know, well, unless you want to correct me, but we all know that the Japanese judging can be pretty freaking biased and pretty ridiculous. Yeah. And I always thought that Michael Thompson just got ripped off again. Like they'd give him a hard draw. They keep putting him into overtimes. So he got more banged up. They gave him some bad decisions. I always kind of felt for Michael Thompson because he was such a great fighter. And I never thought he got like really a fair shake in Japan.
I would agree to that. Yeah. I mean, but it's also like he was the kind of fighter that they didn't have a box to check on. They couldn't take him out, and they kept giving him extra extensions and really give him a hard time. But he was such a talented mover that I just think they didn't know what to do with it. Yeah. So they started those, like they've always done, unfair judging, in my opinion. But he was really one of the fighters that got the stiff end of that. Yeah.
And I also didn't realize, but I found out later. I don't even know why I found this out or when I found this out. But apparently, if you look at all the times he fought Andy Hug in karate, I don't even know if they fought in K1, but he actually, I don't know, let's say they fought 10 times. He actually won like most of the first ones. I didn't realize he was dominating Andy Hug for a while, then it kind of shifted a bit.
Well, I mean, in the heavyweights back in those, 80s and stuff like that, I would say there was Michel Vidal.
Yeah, I remember him.
And there was Michael Thompson and Andy Hoog. And Andy Hoog kind of came a little bit after, I feel. But eventually, he ended up becoming a super legend. But yeah, it was quite interesting. But Michael Thompson always had this incredible footwork, so he got away with murder basically in there, and no one could really catch him properly. It was quite the inventive fighter, in my opinion. I really have a lot of respect for him.
And he also wasn't that big for compared. Okay, so that was a little bit of a tangent, but
yeah, no, that's great.
But it was I enjoyed it. Anyway.
Just to put a little bit on top of that camp that we did, there's never been a camp like that for me ever. That was really another turning point for me, an eye opener, and just like he was just such an incredible teacher, and he took me right under his wing and just like paid special attention to me, and it was really, really incredible. We had this one night training session where we were sparring everybody, and bigger guys than me and older guys than me, and I was literally knocking everyone out. It was absolutely wild.
That's awesome. Now I remember your book when you did, you made it to Japan and what I'm sure there's a lot of details around that.
Yeah.
And then I think you were called to Masuyama's office. I don't think you spoke Japanese at that point, and he just kind of said, welcome to Japan. What was that like? I mean, meeting a guy with that kind of, for lack of a better word, aura. Like he has such an intense aura. What was that like for someone like yourself at that moment? Were you just kind of blown away, or what else?
Well, for me, it was absolutely incredible feeling. But I mean, it's like seeing a living God. This is what a God would look like for me. It was more than I expected, and also my body reacted to it in a way that I've never experienced ever in my life, not even since. And I just started shaking out of humbleness and awness. And he comes over and he's just the most gentle man, and that just like straight away he's like, "You're here now. I'm your dad. I'm your sensei. If you ever need anything, you come to me and you talk to me about it." And I was just like, "Oh." And he said, "In exchange for that, you need to train hard. You need to get your first dan in 1 year, your nidan in 2 years, and your last sandan in 3 years." And I was just like, "Yeah, it's going to be impossible, but also, and you do your best." So yeah, I trained really hard. That's for sure.
What about him, aside from the obvious and his skill, his talent, and his vision? What about him was so motivating? That's the word I'm looking for, motivating. Even I remember in your book when you mentioned that, like, when you were eating, he liked everyone to eat a lot, finish your meal or whatever. Like, even that's a motivating thing, where you're telling someone, hey, you got to eat a lot. You got to eat until you're completely full and train like the way he wants you to train. If someone doesn't have that motivating vibration within them, at some point, the people they're telling to do those things, they might stop doing them. But what was it about him that was so motivating?
If I could, I've spent 3 decades thinking about this. If I could actually pin it down, I would like to. But it was like being in the presence of someone who without asking you, makes you want to be better, makes you want to be stronger. We were a bunch of skinny kids, all right? When I first moved to Japan, I was 72 kilos. And of course, he's going to tell me, you need to eat, more food because you're too skinny and you're not going to be strong enough. And I want you to be champion one day. And it's just like, if that's what he tells you, that's what you're going to do. Literally on a weekly basis, he would tell me the same thing and ask me how much I weighed now, how much I had weighed when I first got there. Yeah. And then so if that's what he tells you, that's what you do, and I started at 72 kilos. And by the time I had gotten, to the last meal with Sosai, I was 102 kilos. And he patted me on the cheek here, and he touched my shoulders and arms, and he goes, "Oh, you've gotten big and strong, huh? How heavy are you now?" And I was like, "Oh, 102 kilos. And he looks me up and down. And he goes, "How heavy were you when you got here?" And I was like, 72 kilos. I was super proud. I'd gained 30 kilos in 3 years. I was a heavyweight at that point, from a lightweight to a heavyweight. Then he looks at me, "But now you're too big." And I was just like, this is the kind of humor he will have with you, And he was right, because at the time I had actually broken a leg in a tournament, and I'd gone from 96 to like 102 in like 2-3 weeks, and it was not working out. It was just weightlifting and stuff. So once I started, training again, my weight evened out at about 94, 95 kilos, and that was a good fighting weight for me.
How did you look? Obviously, anyone at that level who's, an Uchideshi fighting in, the most elite tournaments, listen, everyone knows how to punch. Everyone knows how to kick. Everyone can take a lot of punishment. Everyone has great stamina. That goes without saying. But how did you kind of determine your fighting style? I can just from watching your fights, you have a spectacular low kick. Spectacular.
Yeah.
One of the best leg kicks. I mean, I'm talking like Rob Kamen level, super legendary low kicks. So at some point, I'm sure, everyone else is throwing low kicks, but at some point in your own head, you're like, damn, I'm good at low kicks. I can rely on that. When did you kind of figure out the stuff you're really good at? How did that come to be?
Trained a lot. And we sparred a lot. A lot. We spar four times a week between 10 and 20 rounds. And I would make trainings with my kohai and have them do drills where they would put him on padding out, and I would fight with him. It was like fighting a big sandbag that was alive. But I think I like to kick. more so than my punches, to be honest. Not that I saw myself as a taekwondo kind of style fighter. My punches led to the kicks, and the kicks were the ones that I wanted to be good at. I had very heavy legs, and I did something that most other people don't do. I kick with my foot. I don't kick with the shin.
Your foot on their thigh?
I'm a foot kicker.
Your foot on their thigh on the low kick.
Yeah. And so my reckoning, or whatever you say, how do you say, the psychology behind that would be that if you're swinging a baseball bat, it's the end of the bat that hits the ball. And the same with the foot. If you're swinging a whole leg, it's the foot that's going to hit with the most speed, hence the most power. Plus, the target that I'm kicking with is smaller than the shin. That was my reckoning. And I didn't realize this actually until a couple of years ago when I started looking at my old videos, and did a video with the Kyokushin analyst on YouTube, actually, where he analyzed my low kicking, I think it was specifically. And then I started looking at all the other videos. I was like, holy shit, without knowing this specifically, I was a fantastic left leg low kicker. And I took that into K1, and then I added on a double low kick, which I had a lot of success with. And that was really cool to just realize it. But and then with the double low kick that I added into the K1, it became really like a fantastic weapon.
When you say double low kick, you mean kicking the same leg twice in a row? Twice in a row,
yeah. Because most people, depending on how you sneak how you try to sneak the low kick in, if it's inside a combination and you get their attention up here, it's, like Arne Slahus is a master of that too. You can get the low kicks in, but if you're not there and you throw a low kick randomly, then they'll mostly block it. But I realized that if they block the first one, they're not going to block the second one. So just put them together, boom, boom. And this was a really good invention that I came with there.
It sounds like from reading your book that, obviously when Oyama would train the Uchideshis, it didn't sound like he was giving specific fight strategy. Maybe he was, but that's at least what I took away from your book. Where did you you develop these strategies just through rounds and rounds of sparring, or did you have kind of a mentor? Maybe someone was a senpai to you who just was like, hey, Nick, do this or try this. Did you have that, or it was strictly trial and error?
Trial and error, basically. But I feel like I was an easy thief of techniques and skills and things. So if someone did something to me and I would steal it straight away, and just try and make it my own and figure out my own style. Sosai never taught us anything but basics and kata. I think we sparred maybe twice in front of Sosai, and it was really short rounds. It's like 10, 15 seconds, and he would beat the drum, and you'd change partners because people went nuts when they were sparring in front of Sosai. He never went over strategy, never sat down and broke fighting down. For example, the Josai Shibu, the Yamada Shihan's group of fighters, they would video, film, and record all their trainings. They'd go back and watch these training sessions and sparring sessions, then analyze them, and then they'd coach the kids in how to get better. They were like on the money for this. Then there was Hiroshige Shihan's dojo with Kazumiya and Midori and all those guys. And they would also do the similar things. They had strategies for how to train and get better, and there was a specific footwork and a specific fighting style, which complemented my fighting style very well. I never lost to anyone from that dojo. So I don't know. It's like also who you're training with. You're training with someone who's bigger, stronger, or faster, or whatever it is. You get influenced by it, but through the sparring, I feel like you kind of find your own way. And I just think it's from a lot of sparring.
When you fought in the European Championships and you took first place,
yeah.
When I was fighting, I fought a lot of Dutch guys. I beat some pretty great Dutch guys, but I lost to a couple too. I found the Dutch guys were very hard to fight. I mean, first of all, they were tough as hell. Second of all, they had that great kind of left hook to liver, right low kick, even before that was too common.
Yeah.
And then, of course, became known as in the Dutch kickboxing was kind of related to that.
Dutch kickboxing came from Kyokushin.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because all those guys who opened those, Voss Gym and
they were all Kyokushin.
And they're all Kyokushin guys. How did you run? I mean, obviously you were an amazing fighter at that point. How did you run through that tournament? So I'm not saying easily. I'm sure it was tough, but did you have to adapt? Because
That was the last. It was the last European tournament where the whole organization was one group. It was the year after Solstai passed away, and Europe was still undivided. So they had all the branch chiefs and all the fighters and all the top champions came in from all over Europe. And in the heavyweights, there wasn't really anyone that was a dominant fighter from Holland at the time. But there was the Eastern Bloc, Romania, Bulgaria, Russia, and I fought all of them. And there were some really strong guys. But man, I was in crazy good shape.
Yeah.
I'd spent a month in the mountains in Romania training with the Romanian team, and we're talking high altitude training in an Olympic village kind of thing. It's a place where we just sparred and trained every day, 2 hours in the morning and like an hour and a half in the evening. I was in incredibly good shape, and when I walked into that tournament, all I wanted to do was make sure that I got qualified to get into the world tournament.
Got it.
Yeah, I knocked everyone out.
What's that?
I knocked everyone out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there a video of that tournament that exists?
Yes. Yes, there is. Did I do something on YouTube about it?
Well,
I can't remember.
I'd love to see some of that because
I have seen it somewhere. Actually, in the final, the Bulgarian guy came out and he went like this. He's like, no, and the referee and I are looking at him going, what? He said, yeah, I'm forfeiting. I'm not going to fight Nick. So I won the final without fighting, and I don't think I've ever seen that in Kyokushin.
I felt like when I was fighting, the Japanese fighters that I fought were very linear. Like it was straight, like hard kicks, but I felt like the Dutch guys was like right straight, left hook, right. They were all over the place. It was very difficult to adapt that style, which I eventually kind of figured out how to do. But it sounds like when you fought in Europe, like the Eastern Bloc, they were still fighting similar to the Japanese guys, a little more straight. They weren't doing a lot of that,
Yeah. I mean, but then I fought Alexander Lapko in the world tournament, and he became like a 4 or 5 years in a row running heavyweight European champion after that. And he's got incredible flashy, strong kicks, and he'll knock guys out with spinning back kicks and axe kicks and everything. But I dropped him with low kicks, the left low kick, by the way. I don't know. I think my style is probably closer to the Dutch style, so I don't feel that I have any issues with that.
Cool. Just before we leave the Uchideshi years, obviously, I mean, being an Uchideshi, the things you learn during the Uchideshi years, the things you experience it stays with you your whole life and helps you accomplish all kinds of things, obviously. But if you had to pare it down to a couple of things, what were 2 or 3 of the main things that you can always look back at the Uchideshi years and just cherish or helps you in multiple ways in life?
I think you have to be very driven to do something like that, to train 7 days a week for 3 years with basically only 3 days off during the New Year's holidays. And I broke a lot of bones during those years, so I was constantly going from injury and not injury and then training for tournaments and everything. And I think for me, the thing that kept me going during those years was the honor of being able to train with Sosai. So the honor of being able to train with Sosai was definitely what kept me going, because there was an incredible respect and there was an incredible will to want to kind of please him and get to the kind of results that he was talking about and motivated us to do. And I felt that I was very driven and very motivated to do these things, and I never really gave up. And I think also during those times, what I learned, which I would say a big takeaway, for example, was how we treated Sosai has helped me in how I run my business today and how I treat the members in the CrossFit business. Because by treating them with respect and kindness, but also being hard and tough at the same time and wanting people to do better, that has given me the successful business that I have today. By
the way, that's a great 30 seconds you just said, because that nice combination of being loving and kind and caring, and at the same time being tough, not for the sake of being tough, but tough for the sake of helping people. It's a beautiful combination, which can help with all kinds of things. So
yeah.
And then before we leave the Uchideshi days and Sosai for the moment, is there any like phrases or sentences that he said that you just are just ingrained in your head forever?
Well, I mean, he said it almost every day. It's like, やればできる。やらないからできないんだよ、君たちは. So, and that means basically, if you try, you can do it. The problem is you're not trying, and that's why you're not doing it. So,
First of all, that's life changing. Anyone who watches this, that's life changing advice. It's like, hey, you're wondering why you're not succeeding because you're not trying.
Yeah,
try, you can do it. Seems simple, but incredibly profound. Okay. Yeah. Let me go to some of your Kyokushin fights. Now it's funny because one time you and I were chatting. I don't know if you remember, on some kind of messenger, and Grobe Fatoza came up. And listen, I was a fighter. I can watch fights, and I have a very good eye for fighting. Not to mention, I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now, so I'm still a fighter. Yeah. But the point is, I can usually see, I have a very good eye for stand-up fighting. But you told me something which obviously meant I had some deficiency in my eye, because I would look at Grobe Fatoza and I'm like, I don't know why he does so well. Like, I mean, I know he's great and everything, but just didn't look that good as far as, elite. I mean, he's that good compared to a ton of people, but in the elite crew, he didn't look like he punched that hard, or I guess you'd have to be careful of his head kicks, the way they come. It could certainly KO someone, and his knees to the face, obviously. But man, his kicks and punches just didn't look that hard to me. And you were like, they were incredibly hard.
They're so deceptive. That was the hardest Kyokushin fight I've ever had in my life. And it went on for 3 rounds. I don't think it should have gone that long. Personally, I think I won it in the first round. But, I mean, you got to fight for something, and so it went 2 extensions. And at that point, then, I was completely dead. But he was also completely dead. He was just a little bit stronger and a little bit fitter than me. I think maybe it's because he was maybe used to sparring bigger guys on a regular basis. Him and Filio were always training together. And I wasn't sparring anyone that big. He's over 190. And it's really taxing for me to fight someone that's that much bigger than me. And then his punches were crazy strong. Like, I don't think I've ever taken any punishment. I can remember one guy, Walter Snaubelt. I remember sparring with him when he came and trained with us in the dojo, and his punches were ridiculous. Like, that was just pain on a stick, basically. But then to actually fight someone on the mat, like Fatoza was, it was really an eye opener.
Question about Fatoza's punches: is it that they were just the power of the punch was high, or they were well placed? Liver, solar plexus, were they just well placed, or both? They were well placed.
I just think he used leverage really well. I mean, he would punch like from over here, and he would just like use all the length of his arms, and really like try and lay it into you. And his kicks are so dangerous that I ended up spending a lot of time evading them, which I did pretty well for most of the time in that fight. But because of the added amount of movement and the added fear factor for trying not to get kicked in the head by those crazy kicks, you spend twice as much energy. And for him, I mean, he doesn't have fantastic footwork. I don't think he has any footwork at all, to be honest. He stands there and he punches and he kicks you. It's pretty straightforward what he does. He just does it really well.
It's interesting because if I had to go back in time, if I could rewind time, didn't happen yet. And someone says, Nicholas Pettas is going to fight Grobe Fatoza. This is what and someone said, Pete, in this imaginary world, you're going to corner Nicholas Pettas. I would just say, keep your hands up, because you got to protect your head, and just low kick the shit out of him. And I think you would win. But of course, that's just my own little fantasy world. So,
well, that's what I did in the first 3 minutes, right? Right. If you go back and watch that fight, it was like a crazy amount of low kicks that kept hitting him, and his legs were smashed. He couldn't walk after that. He got up in the final, and he was hooked.
I figured your low kicks to both front and back legs would win the fight. But anyway, that's that. Yeah. How about Francisco Filio? You did fight him. he looks like he has an incredibly hard maigiri. Am I correct? It looks like he does.
He's a little bit of a different build, and by the time I fought him, I think he was injured in that tournament. He had a broken toe or something, so he had completely no footwork. He was a bit heavier than he normally was. But I'd also been training with him for almost a year, so we knew each other very well. I actually thought that if I'd fought him in '97 in the tournament with Glaube, if I'd won the first round with Glaube and gone up to the final, I think that could have been a really interesting fight between me and him, because we had been training together, and I really felt somehow confident that I could beat him. But the time that I did fight him, I got kicked in the head, and it was very unfortunate. But it's also like anything he does is also the judging in a fight like that, for example. They're just waiting for something to happen. He snitched my face with his foot, kind of slapped me. I wouldn't say it's not a Wazari, but I will also say that I don't really think it's a Wazari. I mean, I think you have to be a little bit more damaged for it to really, because they didn't do anything to me. It just slapped me in the face, and I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. And the judges are on edge. They're just sitting there waiting for it,
Like you said, the Japanese are sitting on the edge of their seat with their flags, waiting for anything. Yeah. So I understand how that could become a Wazari, but at the same time, I could see how it wasn't a legit Wazari.
But he's strong, like physically crazy strong. It's like hitting a tree. Like his body is like, yeah.
I could see that, and he has those very thick thighs. You do also, but I think he's got those super genetic, thick legs and stuff. Okay, let's just go to K1 a little bit. Yeah. One thing in your book that kind of made me chuckle when I read it, you said that there was kind of a training camp for Kyokushin fighters going to K1, I think with Maurice Smith, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And they were kind of determining who might be good, and they were like, they said you're not going to be good at this. So they somehow misjudged that, and that eventually you proved them wrong. Not that you were trying to prove them wrong, but you happened.
Oh, I wanted to prove him wrong.
Oh, you did? Okay, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Who else was on that trip with you? Who were the other Kyokushin guys that?
Well, Francisco had already been in negotiations. I'd already signed his first contract with K1, and then leading from that success, they were looking for the next batch of fighters. So there was Glaube, and then there was me, and then there was Gary O'Neill. And Gary O'Neill had about, I think, 7 or 8 kickboxing fights in Australia, and actually, I think he'd won them all. But we got over there, we all trained and sparred, and then like 4 weeks after, the verdict was, yeah, you guys can forget about Nick.
But they wanted Gary still, yeah?
Yeah.
But he didn't really have a K1 career, am I correct?
No, I don't think he liked it. I think he just jumped along for the trip and like just for the training and hung out. And then he had a couple of fights in some smaller things. The Ichigeki, I think, that he fought in. He was a fantastic karate fighter. Super inspirational and really a pleasure to watch. And I learned a lot from training with him also. But I don't think his heart was in it for kickboxing. I don't think he liked getting punched in the face.
Yeah, and you could see his style for karate, which I agree with you, is very inspirational and awesome, and I totally respect him. Of course, it works good for karate, but I could see how it wouldn't be the greatest because you can kind of dance around like that, but if someone's pressuring you with the gloves and the punches to the face, it changes things.
Yeah, the footwork doesn't work for kickboxing. Yeah.
Let me ask you this about we don't have to go through the details of the K1 fights, A, because anyone could just watch them online, and B, you've actually in your own show, you've talked about the Lebaner fight and things like that. But what I'm curious about, a guy like you who is a spectacular karate fighter who gets into kickboxing, trains properly, but then you're fighting like a guy like Peter Arts. I mean, give me a break. I mean, Peter Arts, Jerome Lebaner. Are you thinking to yourself like, A, I'm scared, B, I don't even know how I could really win this outside of maybe stopping them on low kicks or kicking them in the head, but I'm just going to do it? Or are you thinking like, no, I'm trained. I'm going in here to beat Peter Arts. Like, I'm just wondering what your mindset is before those fights.
Now you say Peter Arts, he's a great example. I fought him twice. And the first time he knocked me out in the first round. This fight, probably most people don't know it, but I had food poisoning from the night before, and so I was like on a 39-degree fever and shit. It was really bad. And so I wasn't really in a good condition. But that is not why I lost. I lost because I looked down and then I got kneed in the head, which I shouldn't ever have done. He comes out to me after the fight. He says, "Nick, stop looking down." And I was like, "Yeah, I get it," but I was I was just not having a good day, Anyway, many years go by, and then I get to fight him again. And the second time, I was like, "I'm going to win this fight."
Okay.
I was like, "Yeah, I'm literally going to win this fight today." And I almost had him in the second fight when we fought in Hong Kong. Almost had him twice, both in the first round and the second round, and then he kicks me in the head, and it's all over. So he's like one of those guys where I'm just like, yeah, I will never get to that level. But man, it was an honor to be able to actually have stood in the ring and fought him.
He has a slightly, I mean, you have to look closely, but he has a slightly almost awkward style, and his footwork is kind of awkward. Was it hard to kind of gauge his timing because of that, or you were so good in gauging that stuff that was not really an issue?
The second time I felt very confident. And I think if you go by point system, right, I probably won the first round and clearly lost the second round. But his awkwardness is what makes him so good. And I think because he's a bit awkward, you see him walk. He doesn't walk straight even today. He's kind of got like a I don't know what you would call it, a Pete Art shuffle or something. But because he's a little bit awkward, he also takes advantage of the way he can move, and he works a lot on angles. And I don't think. I have to ask him this because I'm going to see him in December again. I'm not sure if anyone actually took him aside in the gym and said, "This is how we want you to fight," and if they taught him those angles or not. But I've seen him teach in Bulgaria on the camps, and I've seen him what it is he does, and he teaches how he fights. But I don't see anyone actually being able to be good enough to mimic it the way he does it.
Yeah, that's a good insight. What about when you won the K1 Japan, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
the K1 Japan, you beat Musashi. So first of all, just educate me. Musashi was never a karate fighter, right? He started with kickboxing. Am I correct?
So he's from Seito Kaikan.
That's right. No, you're right. I forgot that he is from Seito Kaikan. So he
was I don't know if you remember Satake.
Of course.
So Satake was, their karate world champion, I think, and then he lost to Andy Hoog in a Seito Kaikan world tournament one time. Musashi was the next kid he was like if Francisco Fila was there, then I was like, one of those next. He was that kid that they groomed and wanted him to be the champ. And by the time I met him or fought him in 2001, he had already won in 1999 and also in 2000 in the Japanese Grand Prix. So he was a clear favorite to win in this tournament. And I'm coming in as the first foreigner to get into the Japanese tournament, which is also kind of like up for debate. But for me, I think it was totally fair because this was the treatment that I'd never been gotten in Kyokushin. Now I was getting it in K1. So I was very honored to be able to fight in the Japanese tournament.
By the way, I think Satake fought against Musashi in K1 and Musashi beat him just in some random match. I think they actually did compete against each other.
Yeah, there was they had a super fight. Yeah, there was a lot of controversy over that because Satake at the time was not very happy with K1.
I remember that.
So yeah, they kind of, I think, I wouldn't say they did a dirty one, but I think they did a dirty one on him, and just to push Musashi to go to greatness.
Even not having known what you just told me, I sensed that. Everything you said, I sensed that without really knowing it when I saw that, just the vibe around that fight. So Musashi, it seems to me like great kicker, It's not like he's doing spinning kicks to the head like whatever. But good, middle.
Great middle kicks.
Yeah.
He's got a decent low kick. I mean, it didn't hurt me. But he's got good movement.
Yeah.
And he reads the opponent well. He understands the fight pacing really well. He understands like the 3-round kind of system. I don't know how to say it. He's good at moving. He's good at reading you and taking it. He's actually a really good fighter. I thought he was better than me on the day, which was slightly annoying. But I also had this incredible support from the crowd. I mean, they were chanting my name, and here's the defending champion, and they're chanting my name. I thought it was awesome. I just felt invisible. If I'm talking about zone in the zone when you're in sports and stuff, I was completely in the zone. I had no fear of losing that day, although nothing really worked out very well for me. I was just like feeling the fight. And I didn't have any strategy whatsoever. I just walked in there with a pure open mind, and wanted to fight how I felt. He had dodged me twice. I trained for him to fight him twice, and he had dodged me. Not dodged me, but he had like pulled out because he said he'd gotten injuries. And then I hear from Sam Greco, he tells me, "Oh, Musashi, no, he was knocking out some kid in sparring last night." And I was like, "Really? Okay." So now I'm stuck with some other guy, and I should have been. Anyway, I got him in the final, and we go the first 3 rounds. It's a draw. I feel no. What do you see? Fear of going an extra 2-3 more rounds. I could have fought 20 rounds that day. And I was not. In Japanese, just I said I was not like. Was not, what do you call it, anxious about getting it right or wrong. There was just something in the air and in the atmosphere and something in the way I felt when I fought him that nothing really could go wrong that day. And then I pulled what I would say is a classic karate strategy for fighting him in the extra round, because it's not a must system, but it's they could be up to potential 2 extensions. But they only judge you for that 1 round. So I did 2 minutes and 30 seconds of whatever to not get knocked out and just like sussing out the situation, not over rushing anything. And then I hit him, and I didn't stop hitting him until he fell. And that's basically how you finish a karate fight sometimes.
When you won that, you were you were standing in the ring. You're like, I'm the K1 champ at that moment. I mean, obviously you were psyched and happy, of course, but did it feel like you thought it would feel, or did you feel like, oh well, this feels good, but I'm not,
That's the champ photo right there behind me.
Yeah,
it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I felt that I'd finally accomplished something in my life that no one can ever take away from me, and to have a K1 champion belt is mind blowing. Even today, I look at it and I think, wow, I really did that.
I love to hear that. That's inspiring for anyone. What you just said for the last 30 seconds about that is completely inspiring. It's funny, and of course I would only be A, guessing, and B, I'm not a mind reader, but when I used to see Andy Hug win, he just never seemed too happy. Like he just seemed like always a little sad. Maybe I was misinterpreting it, but Andy Hug would win some huge fight and he just seemed kind of sad. I don't know. Maybe
he won the Grand Prix in 96. 96.
Maybe you're right. 97. Yeah.
96, I think it is actually.
Yeah, he beat Bernardo in the finals with like a spinning back row kick.
So that fight, he looked really happy.
Yeah, that was one of the exceptions. But in general, he just always looked. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, next thing I wanted to ask.
That would be interesting to go back and have a chat with him. I'd be able to talk to him today, because I mean he was I was a huge fan of Andy Hu. Very, very inspired by just his fighting spirit and style and everything. The axe kick, clearly I was copying that from him. And I was fortunate enough to have met him and spoken with him on many occasions. And he was always like, he was 10 years older than me, so he was always like that big brother kind of character. If I'd had the chance, I would have gone and trained with him, but Kyokushin wouldn't allow me.
Sweet. Well, perfect timing, because my next question was going to be, and obviously you can say as much or as little as you want about the subject, obviously, but you want to talk a little bit about like your leaving Kyokushin, like just how that all went down, or how you felt emotionally, or with why is his name escaping me, Matsui or whatever, if you want to.
Yeah. I left because I had enough. To keep it to make it real simple, when Sosai was alive, I would have died for points for this man, and I literally did, and gave everything, and then created some fantastic results. And then the organization changes, and then there's new, by default, because I was at Hombu and I owed money to Hombu that I hadn't paid all of my tuitions as an Uchideshi for. I needed to pay them back, and Sosai had hired me to be a sensei at the dojo, and so I did that, and then I did some other work outside to pay back the money as fast as I could, and it was all gone in 6 months. So technically, I could have left if I wanted to. But I kind of had a vision that I wanted to stay a little bit longer, and I was also really in a period in my life where I was very young, for one thing. and very easy to not manipulate. But I was with that Japanese fighting squad team that Sugimura had built, and we had a really good thing going. And I felt like I could do a little bit better. And there was a world tournament coming up that I really wanted to fight in '95, and so I stayed. And then after '95, you kind of get caught up in all the training, and then I wasn't quite sure where my head was. But after '96, I was like, okay, I'm done here, because the fight against Okamoto Toru was just like the pinnacle of me fighting for something that would never come. I would never be the Japanese All Japan champion unless I knocked everyone out. And Gary O'Neill got up to the final twice because he was knocking people out. I was never that fortunate. I didn't have that kind of skill or technique. My fighting style was very different, and I just feel like, okay, there's a limit to how much you can be unfairly judged and also ruled behind the scenes. And so I was offered to go and open a dojo in Australia. And I thought, yeah, I would like to see some koalas and try something different. So I was about to leave Japan when they offered me a part in K1. And with K1 comes professional career, professional management. So the rules change, the way they treat you change. Also because suddenly I'm famous. And anyway, when I broke my leg, it was the last straw for me when they told me to not tell anyone which hospital I was in, because they needed me to be quiet about it. I was not allowed to tell any one of my friends where I was. I was only allowed to tell my wife about it at the time. And I was just like, this is like the time in my life that is the most traumatic, and they're still trying to control my movements and in general, like what I could do in life. So I decided to leave because I'd had enough of the way they were treating me. And I just didn't feel comfortable following some leader that is not really my leader.
Got it. Makes total sense, especially the last thing about following a leader that's not really your leader. That's an extra little, cherry on top, which makes total sense. Just switching to, you had a great TV show. I liked it a lot, where you would go, for those who haven't seen it, you would go and check out like Okinawan karate or judo or aikido or Japanese weapons.
Yeah. Samurai Spirit.
Samurai Spirit. It's a great show. It was great. You did a great job.
Thank you.
When you, let's say, locked up with a judo guy, like you're showing you, I mean, obviously you did what you did. You reached the pinnacle and karate, full contact karate and kickboxing.
Yeah.
But was there any even ounce of you that was like, man, it would have been cool to learn judo? It's pretty cool. Or were you just like, no, this is cool. I'm doing the show. I respect it, but I'm not like missing it or.
Oh, no, I was always like intrigued in learning martial arts techniques and stuff like that. And I was very fortunate to shoot that show actually, because I got to experience like 8 different styles of martial arts. It started with kendo, and we went to iaido, kyudo, sumo. We did sumo. And the last one was karate. But I also started in that period. I was a professional fighter about to fight Peter Arts, to getting my hip replaced, to like having to go through rehab. So we spent like almost 3 years filming these 8 episodes, and they were fantastic. Like probably some of the best TV I've ever done. And also because it was a great team. It was the same people that I worked with every time, and they literally wrote the show for me. And I learned a lot. But it was also after I left Kyokushin and made my own gym and made my own training fighting squad, that I had politically problems by getting back into K1. So I started training MMA to fight in Pride. So I spent a good 2 years doing MMA sparring for 2-3 times a week, just to like brush up on it. I was so close to fighting in Pride that on December 16th that year, I think it's 2005 or 6, where I had the choice to sign between 2 different contracts. One contract with K1 for me to come back and actually fight in K1, or another contract with Pride. And the Pride contract, money-wise, was much better, and it was kind of attractive, but it was also a little bit more high risk. So I ended up signing with K1 and going back there. And then Pride, that was their last show that New Year's Eve. And if I'd signed with Pride, I would have only had one fight and it would have been over.
Who, just out of curiosity, when you were training for MMA, Did you have like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach, or you just were learning kind of like Japanese, like shoot fighting grounds?
No, there was one Japanese kid called Takase, who was considered like the top grappler in Japan at the time. We would come in and we'd spar and train with him. He was a shitty stand-up, but in exchange for the stand-up that I would do with him, he would work with me on the ground. And then there was a former sumo wrestler, Sentoryu, that would also come in and train. And then we had these Russian fighters that came in, these brothers, the Shmitov brothers, and they lived with us for about a year, I think, and I also trained with them. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't specifically going to a dojo; it was more like just whatever we could figure out how to do it in our own space and time.
To this day, I mean, obviously you're involved in several different things with your career and your gym, etc. But do you like to, I don't know, mess around? You like to hit the heavy bag or do some light sparring or do some jiu-jitsu? Do you enjoy doing that stuff these days?
Yeah, fine. Well, so I started teaching martial arts this year again. I took like a 10-year break because of the CrossFit business I opened up. I was literally too busy with it. And I think last year, the current K1 under 90 kilo champion started coming in and asking me to help him out. And so I started holding pads for him. I got a little bit excited, and I got some shin pads. And then I got a pair of gloves, and then I bought a mouthpiece, and I sparred him a couple of times. And I was like, okay, I know I can still do it, but this is just too hard on my body. It's just too much pain. So I try to not spar, but I'll still hold pads and stuff, which I find is enough. I don't really miss so much me working on the bag, for example. I can't motivate myself to do that. But my wife, she likes boxing or kickboxing, so I'll either work out with her. I'll even spar her sometimes just for fun because there's no pain involved there, and that's kind of fun.
And then one of the show, I think it was one of the episodes. I don't know why his name is escaping me, but you'll know who I'm talking about. It was a super great fighter, Kyokushin fighter. I think he won the All Japan several times. Again, his name is just escaping me. But now he has a dojo where I think they just do like kata and like.
Oh yeah, that's Kazumi.
Kazumi.
Yeah.
Was it when you showed up there and you saw what he was doing these days? I mean, obviously you're not going to like judge him. I mean, you respect him, of course, but were you kind of scratching your head like, what is going on here? Or were you just like, oh, it's cool. That's what he's doing. Good for him. Whatever.
I think that he had so many problems with political issues that he went a bit mental at a time, and then he had a big falling out with his partner from the dojo that he was running originally. And I just think that he doesn't know anything but karate. Like, he has absolutely got no other skill set. This I know for sure. But he was super dedicated to karate so many years, and this is full contact karate. And he was a master. He's been in more finals than any other fighter ever in Kyokushin, and he's won most of them, of both the All Japan and the World Tournament. But see, the World Tournament again, I feel they pulled a dirty one on him, and he's the local champion. But because Francisco Filho was in K1, and I think they pushed it a little bit, and then I don't know, he was about to kill himself after that tournament. And so I think his mindset changed a lot, and he ended up leaving, making his own dojo with Iwasaki, and then they broke up and left, and now he's got his own little dojo where he teaches martial arts, karate. But you see, this is what I can't wrap my head around, and I'll probably never will understand this. So I asked him, so I understand that you don't want to teach, full contact fighting or fighting, like real actually fighting, and you just want to teach the kata because that's what you think they do in Okinawa. And he says, but have you studied under an Okinawa master? Or is this something you came up with all by yourself? And so he says, I came up with all by himself. And so at that moment, I was like, well, you've just lost me then, because now I have absolutely there's no lineage of knowledge that is plugged down to you that I want to learn from. So I was very, not disappointed, but yeah, slightly disappointed.
It's almost like he got so, I'm just hypothesizing, it's almost like he got so disgusted with some of the things you mentioned before that he kind of short-circuited a little bit and just tried his best to stay in karate and just kind of created some little box that was like safe for him away from all the nonsense. Who knows? But interesting.
It's probably exactly what happened. I mean, I can't feel nothing but sorry for the guy, but at the same time, he's also the same person that I was chasing for 10 years. I think close to 10 years I was trying to get to him.
He had a great fight with Pettas that when he was kind of losing, but then he low kicked him. Well, that was a great fight.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
let's wrap it up with this. I have a final subject for you.
Okay.
So, great interview, by the way, so far.
Thanks.
Don't you think?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. So, let me wrap it up with this. Usually someone would ask a professional fighter, "Hey, like, what's a good way to eat? Like, what's a good way to eat and exercise to be healthy and be a champion?"
Yeah.
And a lot of fighters are very careful about how they eat. But some, like for example, in the United States, the NFL, the National Football League, like a lot of these guys who are NFL stars. I mean, of course, they exercise like maniacs because they're professional football players, but they eat junk food, they eat chocolate bars, they eat whatever they want. They don't care
Yeah.
what they eat. And somehow their intense exercise somehow I don't know how this works, somehow nullifies their need to have great nutrition. I don't know. But obviously, you have some cool shows now for anyone who wants to take a look at your YouTube shows. And I think one of them is kind of like a Tokyo junk food type show. So I'm just wondering, like, when you were a fighter, did you have a certain way of eating and now you're kind of just a little more relaxed about it? Or what are your thoughts on food is my question.
Nutrition, yeah. So I'm a little bit up in the air on this one. When I was fighting, I wasn't really into nutrition at all. I wouldn't drink alcohol back in the day, which also changes everything. But I would often eat out at normal restaurants and get whatever I could get my hands on. I also came from 72 kilos to 102 kilos by simply eating as much of everything and anything I could get my hands on for 3 years. And that eating habit kind of stuck with me for the very longest time. And I also never really cared what I looked like. For me, it was the sport, it was the art of fighting that was more important to me. So I was never vain enough to like go and look for my abs. I've had abs for many years when I was younger and training hard, and I think the older you get, the more that just reflects on your body, how you look and how you train. And I don't train and work as much as I used to. I don't think it's healthy. Oh, by the way, if you're thinking, oh, is a champion a healthy body? Absolutely not. I had 17 broken bones and 6 different operations during my career. And there's nothing healthy about that whatsoever. There's also nothing healthy about the mindset of a fighter, specifically when, for example, in my case, we would spar 4 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And all Sunday, you're thinking about who's going to come for sparring tomorrow. How am I feeling? Do I have any injuries? And that's the only thing that's going through your head. So your stress levels are way up here. And then you get through Monday sparring, and you probably, I mostly did good because I didn't go out on weekends. I had kids and a family, so I'd be home and I'd be in bed at proper times. And some of the other guys, they'd be out drinking and partying on the weekends. They come in Monday morning and the sparring, and I would fuck them up, and it always made me feel better. And then Tuesday, they're back on their game, and then you take Wednesday off, and then Thursday, all Wednesday, all you're thinking about, who's going to come tomorrow? What kind of sparring is going to be like again? And then you get to Friday, and you're like, oh, okay, this is the last sparring of the week. And then you smash it, and then you take it, you take 2 days off. And I just think that the stress levels that brings to you, living on that edge on who you're sparring, how hard are you sparring, what injuries are you always living with, is very, very stressful situation to be in. But that much being said, I should have paid attention to my nutrition better, because it could have helped me heal injuries faster. It could have kept more inflammation out of my body, which again leads to faster recovery, and faster recovery means less time spent down, and you just get stronger from being able to train more consistently. I think nutrition now, for me, goes through periods in where I am in life. When I cook all my own meals, I look great. I can lose weight if that's what I want to. I could even gain weight. I can get stronger. But then I look at food as fuel in those times. There has to be some kind of protein. There has to be some kind of vegetable, and then a little bit of carbs. Depending on how much physical workout I'm actually doing, the carbs either go up or down. And I'm happy to eat no carbs whatsoever. Then I've tried to experiment with intermittent fasting, where we do 2 meals a day, or we've done 1 meal a day. And either of all these things are great tools for experimenting if you want to have clarity, mental clarity. The intermittent fasting, I feel, is good in my later years. I like to eat now just twice a day. Some days it's like, I'll just have 1 meal and I'll be happy with that. But it's a feeling. If during COVID, most people gained weight. And during COVID, I lost 10 kilos. I was like, I'm going to show to you guys that if you eat less and move just enough, that you can lose weight by staying healthy and fit. And I posted all those meals on the Tokyo Show, which is my YouTube channel. Not all of them, pretty much most of those videos, and I think they're still up there. And then you can see exactly what I ate. Just for inspiration, I wanted me to be, that inspiration for members in the gym. And so I know what works. But the thing is, it gets really boring. And so there has to be balance somehow. There has to be something that you should not be afraid to have a pizza with your friends if you're out having a beer. And you should not be afraid to have a burger if that's what you feel like. Personally, I'm not a much sweets guy, so I don't eat a lot of sweets. But I like to cook my food when I can, because then I know I'm getting exactly what I want, which is, salmon and broccoli, or salmon and whatever it is. I like salmon a lot. Or it's chicken breast or chicken thighs, and it's the oven baked mostly and stuff like that. So I think what I'm trying to say is that nutrition should be a reflection on how you're feeling and which time of the year it is. What you're eating doesn't always have to be the same, and don't be afraid to experiment with it. Yeah.
Excellent input. And I actually agree. I agree with all of it. Or before you said it, that's kind of my mindset. So I'm right on the same page with you. Nicholas, thanks a million.
Yes.
I loved talking to you. I was super psyched for this interview. And I do plan to teach, as I've told you before, a healing seminar in Japan one of these days. And I'd love to meet up when I come out there.
Absolutely. That could be awesome. I can take, if you guys want to see what I do, so my channel, the Junk Food Japan one, that one is for fun. That's for me being like, okay, yeah, I can have a fitness gym and run it, but I'm not afraid to go out and experience cool foods in Japan. That's what that channel is all about.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a million, and we'll see everyone soon.